Welcome to the Next Pivot Point podcast. This season, I'm focused on sharing stories and ideas from experts on diversity and inclusion. In this episode, I will share some insights and ideas from my guest expert, Veronica Appleton. Together, we will leave you with some actionable tips to think about and discuss with your organization. We share this information because inclusive leadership is a journey, requires bravery and courage, and you don't have to go at it alone. At Next Pivot Point, I believe we're stronger together. We are one. So let's meet Veronica. I've had the opportunity to meet Veronica through my Inclusion School podcast, and she is a children's book author, but also a scholar, a practitioner, and author. At DePaul University, she serves as a senior lecturer of intercultural communications, joining the faculty in 2014. Her research interests include race, culture, cultural intelligence, equity, bias, behavior change, and gender identity. Operating as a scholar practitioner, Appleton speaks on the behalf of DePaul University at corporations and nonprofits including Navistar, Ecolab, People's Gas, ComEd, Walgreens, Tyson Foods, 1 Million Degrees, National Able Network, Microsoft, and AbbVie to provide solution-oriented strategies, business cases, and lectured entitled Communicating in an Inclusive Workplace, Mastering Implicit Bias, and Equity and Cultural Intelligence in the Workplace and Leadership Through Storytelling. Prior to teaching, Appleton served in various roles, including We Are Unlimited, FBC Chicago, Northwestern University, Sports Illustrated, PepsiCo, and Purdue University. And she, in addition to her professional and academic roles, she's also the author of Journey to Appleville, which shares a tale of friendship and goal setting for all families. The book received acclaim from the many news stations, and she's also Diversity Journal's Top Professionals in Higher Education. She received the Relationship Advocate Award from Chicago's Perspective Charter Schools and received the Champion of Growth Award from Shaleso Chicago and named 2017 Chicago's Scholars 35 Under 35 honoree, and many, many more. So I'm so excited to have you on the show, Veronica.
Hi, Julie. How are you? It's great to have this chat with you today.
It is. Well, we got connected through your work that you do in writing children's books, and you've been such an incredible fan of a new podcast, Passion Project, that Simone Morris and I have called Inclusion School. And I'm just so thankful for that support. I thought, we need to talk about inclusion for adults now. So I know you do that for your full-time day job, in addition to all the teaching that you do and speaking that you do. So tell us a bit more about your backstory with your career. How did you get into this work?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because sometimes, you speak with so many professionals, right? And I work in an industry where we're beginning to appreciate the non-traditional backgrounds, right? The backgrounds that doesn't have a linear path, paths that, are multidimensional. And let's be honest, humans are multidimensional. And I think that there's opportunities for us to grow and to develop in our own way. And so the way that my career developed was purely by knowing exactly how to just speak up when I needed to speak up, and to not feel inferior towards others, and to kind of know that I needed to put my career first. And whether it was internships at all the organizations that you just mentioned, or full-time roles, I knew that along that path, education was the most important piece for me. And I knew that that was something that could never be taken away. I earned it. The institutions that I attended, they provided the education I needed. And it's kind of the taken for granted almost, right? When you really think back to all the experiences that you've had, and you see yourself kind of maneuvering through each of those experiences, and you just have to say to yourself, wow, one, I can't believe I just went through all that. Two, there was a lot of bumps in the road. How did I overcome that? Three, I don't know if I want to do that again. And four, who else can I pull up and inspire and motivate to not have to go through all those bumps in the road the way that I did, but how we can kind of charter a new path. So
Yeah.
my background is coupled with a lot of strife, of course, a
Mm,
lot of great opportunities, but finally a lot of patience,
yeah.
because sometimes we have to wait on those moments in order for us to feel valued or to feel um, even the slightest bit of happy. So
Yeah.
I kind of carry those values with me, right? That piece of communicating, that piece of
Mhm.
patience, all of those things, they're important to charter any form of path, right? Whether you're a writer, an educator,
Mhm.
fireman, firewoman, right? Any form of a serviceman or woman in this world, I think that those are the things that we have to consider. And no matter what you do, if you're honest to yourself, that's the most important piece.
Yeah.
That's what you chase. It's the honesty piece.
I agree. And that's so important to our work in diversity and inclusion. Being
Hmm.
honest, being transparent, being clear with people, being intentional is what I call an ally for inclusion.
Hmm.
Veronica, tell me about this year. Um, you said it's been a journey up until now, I'm sure. Being a woman of color, experiencing COVID and the pandemic, experiencing all of the renewed excellent energy around Black Lives Matter and racial justice, and now also doing a career pivot into an internal D&I role that you're doing now. So tell us,
Hmm.
what has this year been like for you? What are you seeing and hearing?
Hmm. Yeah, you know what, Julie? There's the saying where sometimes your view of success feels to others like overnight. But a lot of times when you really take a deeper look at your path and what you've been working on, what you're experiencing today was 3, 4, 5 years in the process, right? It didn't just happen overnight. And so one of the things that I've learned is that things don't happen overnight. And that's just from my view, right? That's my personal view. I own that opinion that things do not happen overnight. You have to work for them. You have to um, be honest to yourself. And um, not everyone is fortunate of those opportunities, right? Sometimes we work so hard for years and never really see kind of the fruits of our labor. And our meaning human, our meaning human. Um, and we see those instances where, for years, right? Even if we look at the history books, where there has been a very large percentage of people of color and women, right, to an extent, disadvantaged, right? And there's disparities even within and amongst women, right? We tend to see more white women promoted at a higher rate. They tend to have higher salaries, better benefits, better empathy from others than other women of color. And so there's disparities across the board, even amongst
Mhm.
people with disabilities,
Yep.
even those who may be elderly within the workplace. There's disparities against them as well.
Mhm.
Those who you just may have that non-traditional background, they tend to not get called on as much,
Yep.
right, for certain projects. Or um, if someone hasn't taken the time to look at your strengths, no matter what color you are, you tend to get sidelined.
Yeah.
You tend to get sidetracked. So all of the experiences that have happened in the last, of course, the last, 4 months right now, right, since the murder of George Floyd, um, that instance was a racial pandemic that this world has been facing since for over 600 years,
Yep.
since the 1400s, right? This is nothing new. This is a racial pandemic that has plagued our world for years. And I have seen an outpouring of allies who have said, I'm there for you. What can I do? What can I read? What can I watch? What can I listen to? All of those are important questions, right? Where can I donate my time, my financial wealth of any sort, my energy? Where can I provide my energy? And allies look like a variety of ways, right? Allies could be not only white Americans, right, but also Latinos, right? Many of my counterparts who are just friends all across the rainbow, right? They have reached out, they've provided support. I've reached out to them during their times of what we call quote unquote strife. And so although there has been a significant amount of change and movement and progress, right? Even in the words of Representative John Lewis, who graciously, passed away in July, he said it best, is that we still have work to do, but we've climbed many mountains. We just have a lot more work to do. And I think that that's very telling in how we can continuously be allies for each other, but also how we can advocate, support, promote, and provide what people need in the workplace. And sometimes, right, you don't always have to rely on an employee engagement survey. Sometimes you can just ask people one-on-one, how you doing? What's going on? You want to go out for coffee? You want to go out for lunch? It's just the simple gestures that is kind of like the forgottens almost.
Oh, I
You
know.
can
Treat
talk.
people like human beings.
Exactly. We don't have to be in the chat room all day. Let's hop on the phone.
Yeah.
I
Right.
want to hear your voice through my ear. I want to embrace that. And then even if I can't hear it through my ears, I want to see you on the screen where we can do a little bit of sign language. I don't know how to do sign language, but I'm just thinking of just everyone that wants to communicate at this very
Yeah.
moment, right?
How to include them.
Everybody, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. Your nonverbal energy is so important, right? Like even just the way that you move into the laptop and you're looking at someone, that just says a lot.
It does.
It controls the tone in your voice. It controls the pitch in your voice. It controls your facial expressions, right? If you're talking to someone or you're utilizing sign language to speak to someone, people can feel your energy. They can. So I think, I know I probably just said a lot, but I hopefully have communicated to people that are listening that we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we sure
We are
do.
not finished. We're not finished.
Not even close.
This is, right? We're not even close.
And it's
Granted,
not going away either.
right? There's a lot of progress, right? The fact that we're having this conversation shows that there's tremendous progress.
Yeah. And acknowledging the small steps along the way, the journey, as you best said, Veronica. I appreciate that sentiment. And I appreciate your kind of collection of your experiences and feelings. And one of the things I get asked most often in my work with allies, especially for white people wanting to continue to show up, for people of color, and especially African Americans, Black Americans right now, is what do I do? I read the book, I did the thing, but now what? And it's simply what you just said is, how you doing? How you really doing? I think asking that question is so powerful. And then, as you said, signaling with your nonverbal, signaling with your body, with your ears, that you're there to listen, that you're there to be supportive. What I'm finding a lot in the conversation with people that we're having this conversation ongoing every day, all day, every day, right? And probably in our free time, reading books and going to events and things of that nature around this, is there is a real kind of compassion fatigue that can come with it. And a lot of women of color, especially 80% of who I work with, generally are women of color. in D&I roles in corporate America will tell me that they're exhausted, or their family is, their friends are, and they're so exhausted about having to talk about this and having to justify things or having to do the Google searching for people that can do it themselves. So, what do you recommend, Veronica, for those that feel exhausted? That you may have felt it yourself. I know I've gone through some troughs, certainly this year for sure, but
Mhm.
with the racial work especially, wanting to keep the pedal to the metal, wanting to keep the accelerator going, but at the same time, we need some reprieve time. So, what would you offer to folks that are feeling that fatigue factor?
Yeah, well, and many times, Julie, I think there's just so many thoughts that come to mind with that. But one, as an educator, anytime that my students, they come to me and they ask me questions about race, culture, how to build strong intercultural communication with one another, I many times in conversations treat others kind of like my students, because if I am wearing this hat of an educator, I typically have it on all the time, and I try to provide as much information as possible to people, because if they're asking questions, we have to develop some kind of answer, right? I've had several friends who have said that they are tired, right? Many friends who look like me and many who don't. And they've said that they're tired. They're tired of answering the questions. They're tired of providing book recommendations. They're tired of providing articles and organizations to donate to.
Yep.
But and I get that. I understand that. And especially if you don't wear the hat of an educator, or someone who is truly tired of going the extra mile to teach someone who should already have kind of the common understanding of what's going on, and the common language of what's happening right now. But if someone is asking the question, they either genuinely do not know, or they're just looking for the right verbiage in the future. And I tend to say yes a lot when it comes to people inviting themselves into kind of my space, and I embrace them no matter who it is. And
Yeah.
I think that that's important. But then I also believe that, say for instance, if there's allies that are becoming fatigued, I do believe that that's a sign of privilege, right? That there's a privilege rooted in that you could become fatigued and forget about these experiences and about these challenges, and you can go into your life and never have to face them again if you continuously feel fatigued or close your ears and your eyes to what's before you. That is a sign of privilege. That's a sign of not having to think about it because you don't have to experience it. Um, so I think that there's opportunities for those moments of fatigue to be re-energized. And um, I was having a conversation with just several people that I know who didn't receive phone calls from so-called allies in the moment of George Floyd's death to, maybe around kind of like mid-June or so. And, several people said that, hey, when I didn't hear from certain people, I kind of cut them out of my life. And I said, well, were there any conversations that you had prior to this experience where you challenged each other on topics of politics and gender and race and um, just all the things that you can think of? And they said, no, we really didn't talk much about those types of issues. Of course, like I thought that I knew them. Well, we can't assume that people are going to just reach out to you, especially if they don't know that it's going to resonate with you
Right.
if something like that does happen. If people don't know, they just don't know. Um, the only moment in which they're held accountable for their actions is when you reveal to them what has been done to you and you share that. And then that's where their response can come into play. That's when they're able to hold themselves accountable to their reactions. But
Agreed.
prior to that, if they don't know, they just don't know.
Right.
So we have to be open. When
Yeah.
all of those experiences took place, there wasn't a given moment where my friends and even family, they knew that this affected me instantly because I teach it, I speak about it. We have to be able to speak. We have to be able to talk about fashion and beauty, but also uh, politics and how it, interconnects into music and how it interconnects into literature and just the world is, again, as we started our discussion, is multifaceted, it's multidimensional, and so are humans. And the way that we kind of connect those things and come back to it is being as open as possible. Even if you don't believe that a discussion is probably of interest to your friends or your family, test it. You know how brands, they kind of test the market with their products. We got to test our friends and family too.
Yeah.
Because if we can't do that, we're also taking steps backward in our personal relationships.
No, I so appreciate that, Veronica. And I know myself as a white person with George Floyd, my reaction was so different as I compared notes with my friends of color and other white people. It was really interesting because at first doing this work, much like you do every day, the news didn't surprise me. It's like, well, this happens a lot, right? And I didn't mean to blow it off like that, but I was kind of like, that's bad. That's so bad. But that happened a month ago. When, I didn't think people would care, honestly. And then when people started showing up and caring a few days later and then weeks later, I was like, whoa, this time it's different. And I am ashamed to admit, that first week for me was kind of like, are people serious or not? Like I was very skeptical. But that's as a white person, right? When I compared notes with my friends of color, they either, as a Black man especially, saw themselves that happening, something like that could happen to them.
Of course.
Women of color, that could happen to my partner, that could happen to my kid. Totally different experience. I didn't see myself in that position, right? I saw myself as an outsider, a bystander, or somebody that would have recorded that, and so we see ourselves in that story and the character we play. And I thought that was really eye-opening for me because I didn't know how to approach my friends of color until later in the week, a few days later when I just said, hey, how you doing? And several of my friends said, I haven't been able to get out of bed for a week or not a week, a day, whatever. They were just wrestling with it or like, I'm so distracted. I can't work right now. It's so overwhelming. And I thought, I wonder what it was about this. And so many reasons why we know that. We don't have to get into the graphic details of just how horrible that was.
Right.
But I think it was a reckoning for white people that sustained more time than some of the other Black Lives Matter, bigger blips that have happened in the media and things. And I hate to call it a blip, but it is kind of what happens. It spikes, then it goes back down. And so I know this fall, wanting to keep the momentum alive, right? What I'm most optimistic about is that organizations are still talking about it. And we're dealing with a pandemic, so it's good that we're still talking about it. And organizations are planning not just for the rest of this year, but for 2021. What does this look like? And how do I build my strategy? And that's the biggest question I'm getting. How do I strategically build diversity, equity, and inclusion in my business? So I'm like, okay, I might be believing now, not as skeptical. Like we might actually care this time because my hunch is, and you tell me if you're seeing something different, organizations don't want to be surprised again. That they don't want to have another George Floyd moment happen and have nothing good to say, because there were so many organizations that didn't have a good response, didn't have a genuine one, didn't have the words to say. It felt very PC and corporate speak, and people read right through that. So you're seeing this next
Absolutely.
wave of, I've thought about it for a few months now, and now we have commitments. And I really like that because you can measure them and hold them accountable, and it's intentional, it's thought through. Even if it's a few months later, it's way better than announcing something at the get-go that just, we donated and our CEO cares, done, on to the next thing.
Mhm.
So Veronica, if you could kind of paint a picture of what you're seeing now with that DEI conversation in organizations and where you see it going forward, I'm curious how the events of this year have shaped the future.
Absolutely. I think, Julie, when you ignore something for so long, it's going to catch up to you. Um, and I think that for the organizations that didn't respond the way that they believed that they should, or, created roles focused on this type of work, right? Equity and inclusion work, but aren't internally prepared for whomever that professional is going to be. I think it's just very eye-opening. It's eye-opening for organizations that are in the midst of this new era in life. As we think about the coronavirus pandemic, we think about children returning to school, right? College students returning to school, or either physically or virtually, right? No matter how you go back to school, you're going back to school. And we have to take our curriculum, take our process, systems, values, missions, and there has to be a reevaluation of how we're not only building a space for belonging, but really building a space for belonging, right? Because oftentimes you may walk into, even if it's a store, right?
Yeah.
You may walk into a store and you feel some eyes cutting at you, or you just feel as if this isn't really a good place. The
Mm-hmm.
same goes for folks who go into a workplace. Wow, this isn't really a welcoming environment. The same goes for a classroom. Wow, this
Mm-hmm.
teacher really doesn't think about, teaching me what I really need to be taught. And so I think that this is a reevaluation time. And I think many organizations have responded to the best of their ability to create more opportunities for professional development, really growing their employees,
Yeah.
understanding how they can not only develop them, but also develop the organization, right? So when I think about the future of, kind of the new season, right? Like an actual season that we're moving into,
Yep.
um, autumn, right? It's going to be new, it's going to be different. And, there's this verbiage of the new normal, floating around. But I think that we've been approaching this new normal for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Many people say that there's a myth that because of coronavirus and being locked in our homes, that people really saw the murder of George Floyd. No, yes, I think the virus had something to do with that, but I think that the world has been in an unrest for a long time.
Yeah.
And we needed to pay attention. We needed to create change. Brands needed to, for years, have been approaching the change of names and product names. Those things have been a work in progress for years.
Right.
We needed
Aunt
to do that.
Jemima. I mean, come on. How long has that been on
Hello?
the radar?
Hello? Movies, all the things. And so I commend all the people that are working toward this moment of change. The marketers, the film directors, the casters,
Yeah.
the actors, the actresses, the podcasters like yourself, Julie, like all the folks that are included in that are the people that are really trying to see a different world. You know that TV show in the 80s, A Different World?
I remember.
You've probably seen it, right? It's like all of the new up and coming Black actors and actresses. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I loved that show and I still do to this day. And I believe they saw a different world as well, right? We
Yeah.
can see the world in the lens of young people, right? Young
Mhm.
people that are experiencing the world before them, and they're changing it while they're experiencing it. And so
Mhm.
I believe that that's very translational into what we're doing today. We're changing the world as we're experiencing it. And I
Mhm.
think that we were kind of in a holding pattern for a while, right? We were trying to get wind beneath our feet, right? The concept of a chief diversity officer is not new, been around for what, 30 plus years, right? So this is not new. I think the way in which we approach it is new. Um,
Mhm.
I think that embracing those differences and bringing more allies to the table is going to be hugely significant, but those allies have to be willing to come to the table,
Yep.
have to be willing to come to the table with ideas. And I believe that, there's that phrase, right? Want a seat at the table, but I want not only a seat at the table, but I want a meal to eat when I get there, and I want to be invited to the next table. That's how you really create equity,
Yeah.
right? It's not only getting a seat at that one table or boardroom, but it's continuously being invited. That's how we establish that change that we need to see. So, um, hopefully for anyone that's listening, uh, they're starting to see those modes of change, but also are in positions to create that change, because change does not just happen at the organizational level. It happens at the personal level,
Yeah. It does.
most importantly, right? Franklin Covey, he said, hey, you can you can't really change the behaviors of people, but you can be held accountable for your own actions, right? You can change your behavior,
Mhm.
right? It's on a very personal level. So if we personally change, and we personally change our households, and we personally change the people that we surround ourselves with, that's how we can create the world that we need to see.
Yep.
And no matter what your political views are, hopefully there's an opportunity for us to expand our knowledge
Mhm.
as the election is coming up.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can accept that the lives of women and men who have served this country deserve the right to grow their families, their careers in a safe environment. Hopefully we can continuously protect our children, right? I'm not a mom yet, but I want to make sure that in the future that, when me and my future husband brings a child into this world, that my child will, you know, be embraced when
Mm.
he or she goes to school, be embraced in their future careers. And we have to embrace people. That
Mhm.
that has to be what we need to do going forward.
So good. Yeah. So many great nuggets you shared there. I love the a different world reference. I think that's a great theme for our conversation, painting a different world together and making sure you're at the table and not just sitting at the table, but you're contributing to the table and showing up again at the
Mm-hmm.
table for diversity and inclusion. I think that's what people in diverse groups are asking for. Like, yeah, you showed up once, but keep coming and come with your own ideas next time too. And listen while you're at it. We need allies to take action for sure. And if there's nothing else that's compelling about joining this conversation, it's the future. It's our kiddos, right? Like you said, I have one on the way, and it's always been the reason for why I do what I do has been having girls. As a white woman, just knowing my experiences of being a woman in the world and how you are treated differently. And then really understanding how children of color are treated differently, and those with disabilities, and those that have different gender identities and sexual orientations. The list goes on. And just to look through a child's eyes and be like, you might be treated differently just because of the pigment of your skin or your gender identity. That really bothers me. Like that really gets to me. So I know as an ally, that's the thing. When I get exhausted, I'm like, nope, you don't have that choice. It's time to turn it back on again. We got to do better for our kids for sure. So thank you, Veronica, for sharing all this wisdom with us. Tell our listeners, how can they follow you? How can they stay engaged with your message?
Of course. And thank you again, Julie, for this opportunity. For those of you that are listening, please check me out at veronicaAppleton.com. You can find all of my social profiles. Please follow me. I do follow back. And please share any questions that you may have, and I'll be sure to provide some answers.
That's beautiful. Yes, so Veronica is such a giver on social media, has been such a big fan and supporter of Inclusion School, our podcast for brave conversations with kiddos about diversity and inclusion. And she's still writing. She's writing more children's books on the topic. So it's such a gift to this world and such a gift to have you with us today, Veronica.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you listening to this episode. Who do you know that needs to hear them? Message, hit the share button, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Simply search Julie Kratz, Kratz. Veronica and I are both there. You can find us and share this episode anywhere you get podcasts. Every review helps others, allies, find us. I host this podcast because I believe we are stronger together. We are one.